Sahana Vavatu, Sahanau Bhunaktu, Sahaviryang Karavavahai, Tejasvina Vadhitamastu, Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. In verse 15, seekers of ancient times performed action. So he is referring to some seekers that lived many thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago, even this generation, even us. So he's not excluding anyone in this statement. Seekers of ancient times performed action. Now, you have to put a filler here. What kind of action? Proper action, righteous action, action that leads to harmonious results. So these seekers put the right time, the right effort, despite the lack of comforts that we have today, despite the lack of computer technology, internet, ease of access, accessibility, a lack of search. They didn't have the ability to look up quickly in the Upanishads or the Gita, chapter 4, verse 15. So they didn't have any of this ease of learning, and yet they too performed the right action for the sake of creating meaningful changes in their life. So what Krishna here is saying is that no matter who you are right now, as you're listening to this, no matter who you are, man, woman, 20s, 30s, 40s, 150 if you are, okay, no matter where you're from or what background you're at, it is never too late. He's not excluding anyone here. Unless there is a real cause for disability, it is never too late. Any kind of it is too late is a self-imposed story. So he's saying here is that every seeker of ancient times had to go through this journey called life. In fact, had no choice because life always demands a response from you. Depends on where you're at, with who you are with. It will demand a response from you depending on your environment. The response that life demands from Andre is a different kind of response that same life demands from Carol, for example, or Ray or Rani. So this means that no one is outside this principle called life, Ishwara's order. And because that is the case, every individual has a duty to fulfill. You cannot say, I don't have a duty to fulfill, because the fact is, if you go to a doctor to the other side of the world, they may not know anything about you, but they know your body very well. So this means that despite them sharing a different culture, a different background, they still know your body. So this means if your body is the same as the body on the other side of the world, there must be one creator. And if there is one creator, he must already understand what it means to move through this journey successfully. In fact, you and I already know what it takes to move through this journey successfully, because nobody questions, say, what should I do to avoid danger? Nobody says that. You already know instinctively what you should do to avoid danger. Nobody has any problems doing, for example, you want to be fit and yet you just don't eat. Is that the case? No. So this means if I want to be fit, I need to eat. So this means there's a cause-effect, intrinsic knowledge through this order. If I want to connect deeper and be a person of devotion and to feel the presence of the Lord in all aspects of my life, I cannot just sort of keep on watching the news every day. So this is already instinctive knowledge. What I have to do instead is have to learn certain behaviors, certain principles that are conducive with that which will make my life more prosperous and more shining. So now what the Gita wants to say by this statement, if you put this statement into the entire Gita, it's really just saying this: any confusion, any helplessness, any hopelessness, any lack of purpose, any form of meaninglessness, any form of there's no way out, any kind of stuckness, that is not intrinsic to life. That is a condition of the mind. And being a condition of one mind, your mind, not somebody else's mind, then what does that mind have a duty to do then? It has a duty to slowly remove the conditions that are only pertinent to one single mind. And he says, by the virtue of you being given the capacity of choice, you have the ability to do that. The only thing that's stopping you is your own stories that we don't quite tell ourselves verbally out loud, but they are running in the background. They're silent stories. You don't go silently, you don't say to yourself constantly, I can't. You don't hear this throughout the day, do you? You don't hear this kind of an affirmation. It runs in the background and it's very silent. So while driving the car, the unconscious is saying, I can't, I won't, I'm too old, it's too late for me. While walking in the park, trying to get a little bit of respite from hard work, in the unconscious, it's saying, I can't, I won't, I'm too old, it's too late for me. So what do you have to do? You have to deliberately negate this unconscious narrative by bringing in a new kind of narrative that is consistent with creating a more conducive life. Now, in Panchatantra, there's a story called the lion and the rabbit. And this story wants to kind of a little bit tie it in. I'll bring some animal stories for some fun. So there was a ferocious lion, and he was terrorizing the forest. And he was killing animals indiscriminately. And so all the animals feared him. And so the animals had to make a pact with the lion. And they said, look, we cannot live our lives properly. We need to have some stability here. We all need to share our space. So what we will do is we will offer one of our own to you every single day, as long as you promise that you're not going to randomly attack us. At least that way, we can live our lives with a predictability, some form of consistency. And the lion agreed. And so every day, one animal from the family had to be sacrificed to the lion. So imagine it's your family's turn, and then you look at your son or your daughter, your mom or dad, or yourself, and you say, okay, which one of us will now be sacrificed to the lion? And you have to do this for the whole community. So it's not easy. So anyway, one day it was a rabbit's turn. It was a tiny rabbit. And the rabbit was facing this inevitability of death. He knew that he will be eaten alive. So instead of succumbing to his fate, he chose to do something else. He said, let me use my mind a little bit to think of a way out. It's just a rabbit. What can a rabbit do against a lion? So now the rabbit decided to slowly walk towards the lion's den and arrive late. He did that intentionally. Now the lion, being this dominant force of nature, was disappointed and asked him, demanded an explanation. Why are you late? How dare you disrespect me? I said exactly every day 2 or 1:30 p.m. you need to arrive to my classroom. And so the rabbit explained, well, I'm sorry, but on my way to your place, I was confronted by another lion who claimed that he is the true king of the forest. Immediately when the lion heard this, his sense of conceit arose, and he said, who is this rival? How dare somebody claims that he's the true king of the forest? Take me to this lion. And so the rabbit slowly took this lion to a well upon which a sun was shining. And so there was a clear reflection. And as the lion looked inside the well, he saw his own reflection, and he roared towards this rival of his. And as he became more and more angry, he jumped inside the well and he drowned. And the rabbit was saved. So what has the rabbit shown us here? Yes, the rabbit is not as strong as the lion. He is certainly smarter than the lion. He did not succumb to his fate and say, hey, look, I am just a small, helpless being. I have no chance here. He decided to do one thing that all the other animals didn't. He decided to think. So this means the rabbit shows us, with whatever resources that I have, what can I do with them in the best way possible? He's showing us there's always one thing left that you haven't thought of. And that one thing is going to help you a lot. And it takes a matter of effort to come up with that one thing. I promise you, this is 99% of the case, just to be safe. You could even say 100. 99% of the case, there is that one special thing. If suppose at work, right? And let's translate this into real life. And the work is demanding, and suppose it's not giving you much satisfaction, okay? I mean, hopefully it is, because you can make the work give you satisfaction. But suppose it is of a nature that's not giving you satisfaction. So now you ask, okay, so this work is demanding. It's not giving me the time. I'm too old to change into something else. Suppose this is the narrative. So this is the story we've been telling ourselves. So now if I go back to the rabbit taught us there's always one thing left for you. So now the question is, how do I take that demanding work, which doesn't allow me time, or seemingly doesn't allow me time, to think about bigger things of life, to develop myself, to connect with depth? Suppose the people around you are superficial, right, in some ways or the other. And by the way, there's no such thing. You cannot quite put people into categories. People are only as superficial as you allow them to be. If you engage and you go first, you will find how quickly a person can drop into depth to match your own. So it cannot see the easy way out is just to say everyone's superficial here, and then because you can keep on saying it for the rest of your life. But when you change, the people around you unconsciously change along with you. But suppose you say anyway, right, this statement, I cannot quite connect with the people around me. So now you say, okay, according to the rabbit, what is one thing that's available for me to turn this work into an opportunity? How can I turn a crisis into a doorway of opportunity? And you say, well, I am surrounded by others. That means I have a chance to develop empathy. Doesn't matter where I'm at. In fact, the harder the situation, the more chance for empathy development. I have a chance to learn communication skills because every day I'm expected to talk, to communicate. So now let me learn few communication strategies online or somewhere, and let me bring them to work tomorrow and apply them so that they can become a part of my natural orientation. Another thing is, I used to do this, and I still love to do this, is you go anywhere and you learn about cognitive biases. There's a nice book called The Art of Thinking Clearly. The Art of Thinking Clearly. And it mentions, I think, over about 100 plus minus most common biases that human beings experience. And one of them is called the availability bias. Now, the availability bias says that the most recent thing that you have engaged with, that becomes your new temporary reality through which you color in everything else. So suppose you read a book about the childhood trauma and how childhood trauma dictates your responses. So now when somebody talks to you, there's a tendency to interpret what they're saying as, oh, that's just your childhood trauma coming through. And you're like, look, I addressed this stuff like 10 years ago. No. See, you've got more childhood trauma to go through. So you can't get out of this one. So now you recognize they're actually under the spell of availability bias. In other words, whatever you've been exposed to most recently becomes a means through which you start to interpret your experience. So now what you might do is you look at this book, Art of Thinking Clearly, and you take maybe 2 biases or 3 biases, such as the availability bias, and then you try to look for this human behavior in those workers around you. And so it becomes like a little fun game, like, let me learn about human behavior now that I've at least loaded with 3 biases and I can look for them. Now, again, the problem with this, see, is now that you are loaded with this knowledge of the biases, now you start to judge people according to the biases. So now you're now under another bias. Now you are under the spell of availability bias. So now you go, oh, wait a minute, I'm just catching myself. So now you play a little game like this with yourself And even movies, you can watch a movie and say, during the 1.5 hours that I'm going to watch this movie, let me have a list of 5 biases and let me just try to look for them in the characters. And you go, I spotted a cognitive bias, a confirmation bias. There it is. An age bias, a halo effect. You know what a halo effect is? A halo effect is when you look at a book, person reading a book on a train, and then you say, oh, they're reading a book, ... Therefore, they must be intelligent. They're just reading a book, okay? So, and then we say, because they're intelligent, they must be intelligent in everything else too. So in other words, we find one positive trait about a person, and then say, this person across the entire board in science, in emotions, in intellect, in their problem solving is, right, top shelf. But that's not true. So this is called the halo effect. And now I say, I've spotted the halo effect. Now, the benefit of this is you have something to entertain yourself with, something that's slightly better than resorting to this judgment mode where I have got nothing to fall back on except my old stories. So now, why am I using this example? Because I started originally is what happens that causes a lack of progress in life. It is that I lose track of right form of living, of right form of action. And how do I do that? By retelling myself an old story. So now you have to consciously tell yourself a new story by giving yourself some information through which you can start to reinterpret the world through this new knowledge. It may not just apply to cognitive biases. It can also apply to the Gita. Take one verse from the Gita, one verse, and then throughout the day, I look for opportunities. How can I reinterpret the world through this one verse? It's beautiful, isn't it? That's how change is created. That's why Krishna says, seekers of ancient times performed the right action with the right kind of effort, with hard effort, with smart effort, of course, to create changes. And as they create the changes, you start to notice yourself slowly enjoying these tangible, observable, measurable results. And you say, this is great. This is working. And that feeds back. I can change. This is working indeed. What else is possible? Okay. Another example is, according to the rabbit, is suppose that you get diagnosed with a health condition. Maybe we will all get diagnosed with a health condition sooner or later, at whatever degrees it is. Okay. So what's the common 2 responses? The first response is, well, it's too late for me. Now what? God is punishing me. There is, nothing that I can do now. That's one response. That means I'm telling myself an old story that just now makes everything even worse. Now it becomes what's called psychosomatic. Before it was physical, now it becomes a mental condition. The second chance is I can say, well, now that this is true, perhaps I can now I can ask myself a different kind of question. What's the real purpose of life? What do I really want? What's really meaningful for me? I can perhaps start to redefine my connections and start to reassess what is it that I really want in my last few days on earth? What's most important now that I have, whatever, how many years to live? What do I really want to engage with fully, as if there's no demands at all upon me? What is it that I want? Maybe I can engage in exercise, gentle exercise. In my early years, 17 to around 23, I was running on and off. And so I found this thing of, I want to motivate myself. I run and then 1 week of no running because I say, it's too much, too early to wake up and I have to look at the whole, run around and then come back. And I realized the problem with this was I was thinking about the process, not the benefit. Can you relate to this? Where there is something that you really want to do, okay? Something that's useful. It is beneficial for you, but you find yourself going on and off. Like there's a moment of pausing and then no activity for maybe 3 months. And then you get back into it. And this goes on and off for a couple of years. Do you know why this is? Would you like to do something about it? Well, there was a very interesting man in my early years, and he said two things. He said, first, you don't have to get it right, you just have to get it going. You don't have to get it right. That's our problem. It has to be perfect. I have to wake up in the right time. If I don't wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, it's too late. My life is over. My day is over. You don't have to get it right. You just have to get it going. This is one of those statements that really stuck deeply. That changed a lot. I don't have to get the right form of exercise, the kind of running that an athlete deserves, or a right form of waking up, or looking in the right way, or having the right kind of capacity for speaking, or the right words, or the right seminar, or the right class, or the right knowledge. I just have to get it going. And what happens when you get it going? Life shows you feedback. This is wonderful. Something has to change. Nothing needs to change. So what happened then? I said, okay, do any form of exercise. It doesn't matter what. Any form of study, even if it's for 30 seconds, even if it's for 5 seconds, it doesn't matter. Just get it going. What a fail-safe, surefire formula for just getting it going and just introducing something new into your life. I loved it. The second is that the reason why we have these moments of on and off, while we come out of something and we don't have that motivation anymore, is because we focus on the process. You're focusing on the waking up and having to put your shoes on, and it's cold, and I have to touch that cold door handle, and I have to go out in the sweating, I'm sweating like crazy, and my shirt's gonna get yellow, and I have to put it in the washer. I have to buy the detergent and then clean my shirts. And you're thinking about, and it's no way to come out of this because I'm thinking about the process. Of course, you're not going to find motivation when you think about the process. So what did he say? He said, rather think about the benefits. Instead of thinking about the process of going out, think about how I will look like, how healthy I will be in 1 year as a product of just going out for 2 squats enough, 1 push-up enough, 1 verse enough, 1 word of chanting is enough. And that 1 word of chanting will give you enough motivation to tomorrow do 2 words of chanting. We call this progressive progress. Because when you do 1 word, now your brain's saying, what's wrong with you? You can do more than 1 word of chanting. You can do 2 words, and then you do 2 words of chanting. And the third thing that I found, what causes me to demotivate myself, is that we tend to do too much at once, and it becomes painful, and you associate pain to that activity because you're ahead of yourself. So what did this man say? He said, instead of running for 1 hour with, crazy speeds, run for 10 seconds. It's like, 10 seconds? Who does 10? This is granny style running. No, just run for 10. You know what's going to happen then? That's called reverse psychology being applied upon yourself. You're going to run for 10 seconds, and then your mind says, you're crazy. You can do much more than this. And then you say, no, I'm not going to. I'm going to do that tomorrow. And the brain says, okay, I can hardly wait till I do more than 10 seconds tomorrow. So now you give yourself motivation. So tomorrow you wake up and go, okay, I just want to, beat my goal of 10 seconds tomorrow. I have to do this because 10 seconds sounds ridiculous. You go out and you do 20 seconds. And then you do 30 seconds. And each single time, your mind becomes more and more primed for longer study, longer exercise, longer concentration, more efficient ways of performing, doing and singing and chanting and whatever it is that you want to do. So this is the wisdom of the wise rabbit. How to motivate yourself, how to use your buddhi to move yourself out of this stuckness or a sense of it's too late. It's not too late, ever. And there's a great amount of relief in knowing this, that it's not too late ever. However, Arjuna has a problem with all of this. He says, this sounds very wise, but I have a better plan. I have a plan of inaction. You see, this is all action that you're speaking of. What about inaction, Krishna? I have to engage with the Kurukshetra, with the other side, which is really just life. Life always demands an action. I have to engage with all of this. What about not engaging? This is much better. And the problem with this is that Arjun has not ascertained what inaction really means. And so Krishna has to explain to him and says, inaction, my dear, is not the solution, because inaction is something totally different than you have thought of. So let's see what Krishna says about the word inaction in verse 16. Kim karma kima karmeti kavayo pyatra mohitaha tate karma pravakshyami yajnatva mokshaye shubhat.
From the seers, scholars, or even the seers, scholars, are confused with reference to what is action and what is actionless. I shall tell you about action, knowing which you will be released from what is inauspicious, samsara.
So Krishna makes an important statement here. He says, even highly accomplished scholars, kavayaha, even they are confused in reference to what is action, karma, and what is inaction, akarma, or actionlessness. So the essence of this verse goes like this. Yes, there is an action available for me. An action can lead to, wonderful things in life, okay? I have bought that idea. Great. But what about inaction? What about just not doing anything? One that purify my mind, one that just de-entangle me from life, one that just bring me to a place of peace. That's the inquiry here. So now Krishna, knowing this is the narrative that we have in the spiritual field, that inaction has a sense of wisdom attached to it. You know how the wise person, how do we usually think of a wise person? An idea, a stereotype. Inaction, right? Doesn't act, doesn't move, speaks slow, says a few words, has little to say, just sits there quietly, and you just sort of stand there in silence, and in silence, words get transferred. These are all stereotypes that we have established. Krishna, knowing this, has to bring out and say, this is erroneous. Now, he says, why is it erroneous to think of the word inaction like this? And he compares the two words, karma and akarma, action and actionlessness, in a very simplistic way. And then I'll give you a more identity mistaken way. So let's start with the first simplistic way, how everyone thinks of these two words. When I say the word karma, action, what does a person imagine? First word, karma, action. Well, it's so simple, right? Whatever, just acting. Acting, that means scripturally enjoined actions, because it's in reference to the Gita. That means rituals, meditating, chanting, singing, doing your 5 rhythm dance, right? Doing your, studies. Just very simplistic. Just do an action. There is no action. Now someone says, do an action, and you go, okay, let me go and, go over there to a seminar. Let me light the fire. Let me do some, 5 minutes of pranayama. Simple. That's karma, simplistic view. The second is akarma. Now, if karma is that simple, then what would akarma be? Actionlessness. It would be equally simple, wouldn't it? If one is scripturally enjoined actions, that means rituals and spiritual actions, whatever you want to put into that category, There's 10,000 of those actions. It's called, go look up the spiritual marketplace and you'll find out. Then akarma has to be not doing that, not meditating, not chanting, not studying, not devoting, just relax, just chilling out, basically. Simple, isn't it? Now, the thing with this kind of a word and interpretation is delusional. Let's do a little experiment. I want us to, with our backs erect right now, even if you are not showing your face on the camera, stand or sit with your back erect and focus on nothing, okay, for 10 seconds. Close eyes. Focus on nothing. Don't do anything. Okay, let's open eyes and analyze this. How was that? Easy, medium, hard. Either way, whatever level of hardness or effort, the point is there was effort involved, wasn't there? Not only was there effort involved, but it required the effort of both the body to stand straight. It's easy to do that for 10 seconds. Try doing it for 1 hour of doing nothing. And the mind, easy to do that nothing for 10 seconds. Try thinking of nothing for 1 hour. How would that be? Easy? It would be so much effort, so much doing would be involved at the level of both the body and the mind. So to say that just sitting alone, doing nothing, it is delusional of itself, because just to do sitting, doing nothing requires so much doing. Not only that, but who is doing nothing? The answer is I am. So in other words, the word nothing or doing is always centered on the individual. It is still at the level of the ahamkara. And so the second mistake, the second view why this popularity of doing nothing is percolating the spiritual world is the problem of putting my identity in the body and the mind. So now, what is the feature of the self, of your real nature? It is that which is actionless. So now what I try to do is I try to mirror the body-mind. I try to mirror the self, which is actionless, and I try to put it onto the body and the mind. So now the body and the mind, one attempts to make actionless, don't they? Because consciousness, the nature of the self, which is consciousness, is actionless. It is actionless, it never moves, it is all pervasive. Now, putting my identity of that self onto the body and the mind, what is the natural byproduct of that? I make my body and the mind as sattvic, as non-moving, as quiet, as spiritual as possible. Remaining calm, speaking really. Wait for it. Slow. And now you're all there going, man, this guy is so enlightened, you know, because he's so sattvic. He's able to control every word. He speaks so consciously. My goodness, I want to be like that. Now, the problem with this is that because one puts their identity or the self is mixed with the body and the mind, and they try to make their body and the mind sattvic and slow and actionlessness, then they project that onto the gurus. And they want to see that in the others. And if the other is a little bit dynamic, if they're a little bit, you know, passionate about life, therefore they are not enlightened. Mistake. That means how the person interprets their own version of themselves is what they project onto other people. And that's what I look for in others. And thus, since you will never find one teacher unless they pretend, intentionally pretend, and give you this mode, which I know quite a few of them in the 1970s and the 1980s, and even 1990s, plus minus. They had this mode of purity, you know, shine and some kind of a special aura, charisma. And people were looking at this and they were amazed. My goodness, this person is enlightened. Why? Because you're looking at the body and the mind and you're trying to find that which is perfect, that which is immovable, that which is pure, and you're dumping that onto the body and the mind. And so I'm looking for purity at the level of the body-mind, charisma at the level of the body-mind, calmness at the level of the body-mind. And if you don't have that, I am not listening. Error. And so Vedanta comes in and says, that is a fundamental attribution error. You have just superimposed the self onto the body and the mind, and you're looking for perfection at the level of the body and the mind. So Krishna says this is a error. And any kind of doing or non-doing, pravritti, forward movement, doing something, nivritti, not doing something, withdrawing, is always centered on the ahamkara, on the doer. So even if you say, I am not doing anything, what is still making that claim? The individual, who you are not. Because the self cannot make any claims. The self has no mouth to make a claim. The self or consciousness has no mind to think whether I should act or not. Okay, now more on this comes in the next verse. But before there, thus Krishna says, gaining proper knowledge of these two words leads you from freedom of what is inauspicious, ashubhat, samsara. Why? Because if I mistake actionlessness to be a person, then I just live as a calm, ignorant person who gets reborn next life. In other words, what is actionlessness for the unwise person, the ajnani? It is still an identity issue. Look at this. Even stillness, purity for the ajnani is an identity issue. Amazing. That means before in the world, I was the passionate one, dynamic one. Now, in the spiritual world, that same ignorant I have just put a different suit on called purity, charisma, and actionlessness. The one who doesn't engage too much with others, the one who doesn't go out too often, the one who doesn't engage with the society. And then, of course, we now have to justify the story and say that's because they're all lost souls to make it right. That is not what a spiritual person is. That's a fool. And so this fool gets corrected in the next verse, 17, by clearly explaining what is the definition of karma and akarma in more detail. Verse 17, karmano hyapi bodhavyam, bodhavyam cha vikarmanaha, akarmanascha bodhavyam, gahana karmano gatihi.
Action enjoyed by the scriptures is to be known. Forbidden action and actionless must also be known. This is because the nature of karma is difficult to understand.
Thank you. So only three words are to be analyzed here. Action, karmana, or karma. Forbidden action, vikarma, and actionlessness, akarma. So karma, vikarma, and akarma. Action, forbidden action, so obviously action, the right action, and then forbidden action, the wrong kind of action, and actionlessness. So the three words are used. Let's go through karma first. Okay, so what is karma? Just simple word of action. The word action requires free choice, the ability to choose. That's what makes you a doer. So karma is an action, or a doer. In this case, when it's a human being, it's a doer. So now what makes something a doer? You cannot say a machine is a doer. You can't say that because a machine doesn't have free choice. You have to give, or an animal. You cannot say an animal is a doer. I know it's very tempting to say an animal is a doer, but strictly speaking, a doer, a karta, is the one who's given the ability to choose between 3 options or 4 or 10 options. An animal can't choose to become a herbivore or a carnivore once it's fine day. Okay, so an animal, though initially or at the surface level, it seems like a doer. It's eating, it's procreating, it's protecting. But strictly speaking, a doer, to be qualified as a doer, you have to have free will, the ability to choose or the faculty to choose between 2 options. And what does free will involve? It involves 3 options. You can do something. That means choose to act, choose to solve a problem, choose to inquire, choose to listen to this, choose to debate now whether we really have free will or not. That's another choice. So again, that's a doer because I know people are going to do this. You can choose not to do. And this is a tricky one because here, if I stop, you're going to think this is actionlessness. No, it's still at the category of a doer. You can choose not to do, such as I'm listening to you passively as you share your issues to me. Is that true non-doership on my end? See, not everyone can listen. That's a hard job to do, listening, and to be genuinely listening. You still have to focus and share empathy to listen. So even though I said not do, is it true not doing? No, it's still doing, but it's a kind of doing where you're just sort of relaxing, chilling out, and offering your ear to somebody else. So you can do something, solve their problem. Let's go together on a park. Let's just walk right now, okay? I know you're under a hard whatever time, or maybe you're happy. Let's go out. We're doing something. Let's chill out and not do anything. Now, even chilling out and not do anything, that's still doing something, isn't it? It's called chilling out. And the third option is, let's do something differently. That means suppose we're having a good time now, and we usually go out on a good time. Let's not go out. Let's play darts or ping pong. Okay, so we're choosing to do something different. Or let's just not do meditation at all. Let's just eat, right? So you're totally changing your options. So kartum shakyam, doing something. Kartum shakyam. Akartum shakyam, not doing anything, even though it's still doing something. And anyatha kartum shakyam, choosing to do something different, something novel, something creative that someone has recommended to you. Therefore, they're all under the option of doing. Now, when it comes to doing, you see, why do you do things? Let's ask this. Why do you do things?
For a result.
For a result. What kind of a result?
One that is in harmony with my likes and dislikes.
Good answer. Very smart answer. Harmony with my likes. Cheeky answer, right? Harmony with my likes and dislikes, not yours. Hopefully, it's in harmony with the well-being of the environment, which also includes myself. So not only the harmony of you, but also has to be keeping with harmony of my values, what I stand for, and what I have well ascertained to be worthy of living. So therefore, both have to ideally be there inclusive. So this is what makes you a person of right form of action. Now, when it comes to doing, I said the question, why do you do? The answer is because you want to gain something that you don't have right now. Is that clear? Action is always to gain something that is not true now. Very simple to understand this. What's not true now, suppose, is a healthy body, according to your likes and dislikes, as David said. So what do? You go and apply action to make the body relatively healthier. That means I don't have a healthier body now, and I will do something to gain what's not true right now. Okay, so action is called, therefore, Purusha Tantra. It is Purusha Tantra. That means it's always centered on your Purusha, on the person who has Kartum Shakyam, Akartum Shakyam, Anyata Kartum Shakyam. Okay, therefore, it is Purusha Tantra. It's dependent upon you, the one with likes and dislikes. In the light of education that you have. Of course, if you don't have much education, you can't apply intelligent actions. If you're very educated, you can apply those three, Kartum, Akartum, Anyata Kartum, Shakyam. They can have a much larger base of actions because you're much more educated. Okay, so that's the first one, action. What about the second, Vikarma, inappropriate action? So now, if everyone by default has a program that lets them know what's the harmonious action to do in the light of keeping harmony with the environment and my own well-being. Everyone has that at some level or the other inbuilt. Question is then, why do we violate that? In fact, all news is really just about vikarma, inappropriate action. Have you noticed that?
Due to pressure?
Due to pressure. Now we have to analyze this statement. What does it mean to know as a child, as a teenager, I am finding myself in a group of people who tell me, let's go and break windows, let's go and vandalize. Initially, the child recognizes this is not the right thing to do. That little trigger at varying degrees of volume, depending on your past causes, of course, you will feel that initially. In fact, you can look at the analysis of this. I like to watch, how do they call them? You know, those who get interrogated after a crime, okay? So now what they do is they record the whole conversation of those who have committed a crime, either murdered someone or they have vandalized something, or usually a murder. And I enjoy watching this because it teaches you so much about human behavior when it's put under pressure. How the most common pattern is denial. So, you know, you have done this, but then the first statement will be, no, I haven't. And they will just play it cool, like, no, it's normal. And they will put these different tricks. The most common trick is playing it casual. But the police force, they're very trained to look at the cues. And one of the cues that you can look for is you start to speak fast. That's one of the cues. You try to speak fast in order to create the illusion to the other that you know what you're talking about. And we human beings like to do this. When we're nervous, we usually talk very fast. The second is that they will say, I don't know. That's the way out. Now, the way that the police will catch you on this is that they will intentionally ask you about a similar time around that region of the murder, and you will suddenly start to magically recall details. What happened? What was the color of the glass that you drank from? Something very innocent. And then they will share the detail, that they will ask you about the time of the murder where they believe that you were, where your fingerprints are. And suddenly you will start to say, I don't remember. I don't remember. Yeah, it was all vague for me. Now the police will use this and say, well, if you remember this event that's even before in crystal detail, and you don't remember this, that's a reason, that's a cause for suspicion. So they will use techniques like this. Now, going back to the thread, I like to watch this because it shows you how, despite them knowing, they always testify when they finally break, and the police force is really good at this. When they finally break, they will testify every time and say, I knew what I was doing was stupidity. But there was a pressure. I thought to myself, this is stupid, this is not right, but something just pushed me forward, and I did it anyway. And one story that strikes me is there were 3 boys that bought a bunch of rocks from Walmart, big rocks, and they started to throw them outside while driving fast on other cars. And so in one day, they reported like 20 cars with these big holes through the windshield. and they were on this road where they were driving about 80 miles an hour. That's 150 kilometers plus minus. And they found a car opposite going towards them. Now they were in a valley, so it was very alone and like alone and quiet. And they sped up the car, and one of them threw a rock right through the windshield. And the rock at 180 miles an hour or whatever it is, it's very fast. The rock being about this, it's like a little meteor like that. It went right through the windshield, right through the head of the person. That means their entire brain, just pieces everywhere. There was no head, there was no face anymore. And the car just tumbled over into the field. Now, these 3 boys were discovered through investigation, and they were all in a separate room testifying what happened. And each one of them was saying, who did it? It was him. It was him. Now, one of them, he said it was him. It was him. It was 3 boys. Later on, he testified, no, it wasn't him. It was actually my friend who threw that rock. And I said, why did you then say it was this person? And he said, because I didn't know that other person. I only knew him for 2 days. So I was trying to protect my friend. But then when I soon realized that we're all going to jail anyway, then I said, I've got nothing to lose and I'm just going to testify anyway. So now then the police asked him, why did you do this? Do you understand the implications that this is somebody's daughter? She was 22 years old. She had a long life to live. They said, I absolutely knew what I was doing, and I didn't want to, but some pressure got me to do it. So now the question is, why is this pressure there? And the way to understand this is through what's called the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I'm going to draw it out on the whiteboard to give you some model to understand human behavior a little bit better, why we violate what we know is not the right thing to do. Okay, so I'm now showing you what's called the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And the purpose of this is to help you understand why, despite knowing what is the right thing to be done, we still violate and do the wrong thing. And this will explain a lot about the news and human behavior in general. So let's start with the bottom. We will say physical. The primary need, because that's why it's the largest, the widest, the primary need for any human being or any sentient being is survival, is multiplication, is continuity of life. It's just built in. This is why we want to continue our life in the most conducive way possible that is healthy. So this means if the physical is not well taken care of, then anything that comes above will become non-important. So that means if you give Vedanta to someone, okay, and they're in a major pain, dementia or schizophrenia or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease, then whatever you feed them upwards, it's going to be in the name of making the physical better. That means everything upwards subserves the physical. That's why the physical is so important. Now, the next one is safety. See, we're not talking about safety from an animal or a lion anymore. We're not living in cave age anymore. We're talking about having a stable life, a place where you can just rest. There's a sense of certainty in which you can discover yourself, in which you can grow. And if you don't have that, then you're going to look for that in places, even if they're not healthy for you. As long as someone gives me a sense of predictability, a sense of protection, that I can develop myself, I can find myself, safety will be a concern. Now, the problem with, it's not a problem, but see, safety is a big thing in relationships. Like when you date someone, or you always want one thing in that relationship, which is safety. Now, safety, you can divide into 2 parts. When someone says, I want safety, what do they really mean? The first is, I want safety at the level of the transactional world. I want safety for the sake of growth, for the sake of discovering myself, for the sake of, discovering my fullness, for being safe in an environment, in a neighborhood. That is all transactional. The second reason why we say I want safety is because what is that which is the most safe? Why do we look for safety or security so much and endlessly? Why do we look for security in endless amount of ways?
Stability.
But what is it that you want to make stable? Because just to look for stability implies
Be happy.
Yeah, be happy. So that implies there must be someone who intrinsically identifies, who recognizes what is good for me, which is security, stability, fullness, right? Happiness. So this means as long as my sense of identity is in that which can never be secure, can never be fully happy, for whom happiness fluctuates all day long, for how long are you going to be searching for security and safety? That's called still samsara, still birth and death. That means you're going to be constantly occupied for looking in a relationship for security and safety, which by virtue of change, you can never receive fully. And so we say, no, something's wrong with you. I don't feel that security or safety, when in truth, you are that which is the most secure and the most safe. So once again, fundamental attribution error. I'm attributing or trying to mirror the self's features, which is the most secure and the most safe, trying to dump it onto my life, called the body mind, and thus make that sense secure what cannot ever be secure. But at the same time, you need security. So if I don't have the security or the safety, then anything above will be in the name of security and the safety. The third one is social. Social is where you bond, where you connect, and you feel a sense of belonging. Like love. I belong to this group and I have a place in this group. So I'll say belonging. Animal or human being has a need to belong to one group or the other. So now let's go back to that example. Why is it, according to those interviews, where the kids knew that this is the wrong kind of action, and yet they still went against that wisdom, that inherent wisdom? Why is that? Because at home, did I get belonging? Did I get a sense of belonging from my parents? Perhaps not. So suppose at home I didn't. Home, no social status or belonging or love or connection. But where do I find love, connection, and belonging? I find it in the wrong kind of group, a group that's willing to throw stones at other cars. And so it overrides that desperate need for something that at the transactional level, we all require. Okay. Now, if you go up, esteem is where, despite having physical needs met and a sense of security and safety and that platform upon which you can grow, and you belong to a group, what of all of that, if you're still in a group feeling like I'm not good enough? You can very much be in a group, people who love you, and yet the person still feels lonely and disconnected. And so esteem is, I'm an accomplished person. I am a person that has done a good contribution in this world, who has a unique talent and unique skill and makes a difference in this world. So this means that until I have that self-esteem, then all of these below won't really matter. I can have all the comforts in the world, physical, food, big house, big car. I can have the safety from the community, from my spouse, my partner, girlfriend, boyfriend, and they give me that platform. I don't even see it. Why? Because my own self-esteem is saying, I'm not good enough, and therefore you're not good enough, because if you were good enough, I would be feeling good about myself. But the problem is right here. I do not feel good about myself because I haven't looked at those unconscious obstacles that are still lurking and need to be addressed. Therefore, here is achievement. I'm just going to say esteem or worthwhileness or worth.
Self-worth. Self-worth.
Self-worth, yeah. Self-worth. So important nowadays. We have abundance, more today than we ever did before. And where are most kids today? It's right here, self-worth. That's where a lot of problems start. And so then they start to say, so to get self-worth, what do I need to do? I need to get a little bit of social belongingness. And so let me connect with anyone who is important, who is, status driven, so that I can associate myself to them, and therefore I can increase my self-worth. Let me connect to any place that gives me security, even if it's in a gang or a place or a relationship that may not be completely conducive to my growth. It doesn't matter. It gives me security. Let me connect myself any way, to gain money, whatever means necessary to be physically apt. And this one is self-actualization. Now, this does not mean moksha, because Maslow was not studying the Gita. So you have to turn this word into a different context. Self-actualization means that knowing that my physical needs are met, my safety concerns have gone away, my social bonding and sense of love and connection is decently, well put together, knowing that I have self-worth, I am a worthwhile human being. Inside, you also know that I have so much potential. I have skills for talents, problem solving, art, expression, but you are put in an environment that doesn't allow you to express your potential. How does that feel? It's stifling. It brings the person down. They know they have so much greatness, but there are certain forces, whether adhyatmika, adhibautika, adhidaivika, whatever forces there are just pulling me down. Maybe there's a war in the country. Maybe there is a loud, neighbor who's playing music all day long. And so you try to develop your potential, but then they turn on the music. And how do you feel? Despite you've got high self-esteem, you've got social connections, you got everything else, you feel like you're being pulled down. So now you want to reach out and find a place to self-actualize, to discover that inner talent. Now, how does all of this connect to moksha? It connects very, very, very deeply to moksha, because if my physical needs are unmet, then everything above is going to be in the name of the physical. If my safety needs are unmet, then everything other than safety will be in the name of safety. Everything like esteem will be sake of safety, physical will be safety, right? And then somebody says to you, you are that which is the most safe, most secure. But where are you still looking for safety and security? At the level of the transactional. So now I say to you, moksha is that which is the most secure and safe. And so what do? I take talents, I take self-worth called self-help, I take physical, being very fit, I take safety and security, being in a spiritual community. All of that gets mixed up in the name of moksha. So what this chart wants to show you is you first have to take care of all of these needs relatively well to be able to then say, I have no connection to this. I now want to discover my truth. The body-mind called Andre, Jaimini, Thomas, David, Archana, she has a need for this. The person has a need for this. And I need to develop these skills and talents and a lifestyle in order to be at peace enough to ask the question, who am I really? What is my real purpose here? So that's why it matters. Therefore, coming back to the thread, what is vikarma? It is inappropriate action. What causes inappropriate action? It is the lack of needs being filled in this chart. And thus one finds a way to fill those needs, even if it's an inappropriate action. Okay. And that was the purpose of this chart, just to help you understand human behavior a little bit more. It's a model. The next category is akarma. So far we spoken of karma, vikarma. Karma is appropriate action. Vikarma is inappropriate action. And akarma, actionlessness. This is where the confusion is. Now, a common understanding of the word actionlessness is not doing minimum amount of things, playing it safe, not doing anything at all, finding yourself in a situation where someone does something that's unrighteous, and you decide, suppose it's your boss does something that's unrighteous, and you decide to not do anything. You decide not to report them. And then you say, someone asks you, suppose you share it with your friend, someone that you trust, and they say, what did you do? And you say, well, I didn't do anything. I did nothing. And so you then say, this nothing, this non-action is just not doing anything. But actually, you did something, didn't you? You decided to not do anything. So this means you still did the non-doing. You were a doer of non-action. Therefore, this is not in the category of actionlessness akarma. What is the issue of not doing? What do you think is the issue of not doing? Before you answer, let me, little timeline. How does everyone come into this world? With lots of punyam and papam, right? Okay. And that punya papam has to be exhausted. Okay. So now, keeping that in mind, suppose you take the path of not doing anything. What do you think that's going to lead to? Chilling out.
You'll get stuck. You won't progress.
You'll get stuck. What will happen to your punyam and papam? All floated to the next lifetime. Chilling out, postponing all the stuff that's going to happen to you, just waiting for the next, just dumping it onto the next life. That's number one. What else do you think is the problem with not doing?
You don't get any feedback from the world, so you don't know where your gaps are.
Super. That's the most important one. Pankaj?
Not doing anything is actually doing a papam.
Good, good. Because anything in the world requires you, like a flower, to contribute, because you've been contributed to all your life. And now I just chill out. I've got the greatest body of all human species with free will. And I'm just saying, hey, here's one ginormous finger to the Lord. Thank you for giving me this body. I'm going to do nothing. That is definitely papam. So now, what else is the issue of not doing anything? Well, number one, your punyam and papam are left undone. They just sort of chill out. They just relax and they float around waiting to come out in the next life. Secondly, how do you actually make your life into something that's worth living? Is it through non-doing, or is it through doing and getting feedback, as Ravi said? It is definitely through doing. Not only that, how does one gain moksha? It is through massive amount of action that is of the nature of punyam. And what kind of action? Purifying the mind, cleaning up the mind. And for that, you need to engage in the world, as Ravi wonderfully said. Therefore, you cannot gain more, you cannot gain that which you are, that which is limitless, and the only thing worthwhile of pursuit, because there's nothing more beautiful than who you are, that which is full. There's nothing greater than that, because it is everything. The only way to gain that, as though to gain it, you already are that, as though to gain that, is by action, the right kind of action, karma, not vikarma, karma. Therefore, when you look at your life, you only have two options, really. What are they? Karma and vikarma. That's it. Now, obviously, vikarma leads you to a more papam, more dukkam in the future. So naturally, you only have one option. It's really funny now. You have no option, really, because you only got one option. You got one option, so you don't really have an option, do you? And that one option is karma, the right form of action. Kind of ironic, isn't it? I've got choice, but I really have no choice. And so not having a choice, but to engage in the right kind of action in order to gain the antahkarana shuddhi, the expand my mind, expand my thinking like the rabbits, to think a little bit deeper. I eventually come to my very nature, which is akarma, actionlessness. So what is this word actionlessness referring to? It is your nature as the sakshi, that which is the actionless presence. In the presence of what has this entire class been going on now since we've begun? You have to say it's in the presence of me. Right? In the presence of whom has this conversation, this class been going on? In the presence of me, I, consciousness. In other words, actionlessness is who you are. And any kind of activity, whether karma or vikarma, is always a product of the body and the mind. Because the body and the mind is that which acts, which moves, which thinks, which inquires, which works things out. Even working things out is still an action. Now, you have to work things out long enough until you figure out that which is working things out, I am free of. Let me say that again. You're using this instrument long enough to figure things out in terms of who you are until you come to a point and you realize that which was figuring out who I am, that very instrument, I am not anymore.
I was wondering if you could please say more about this burning out of punyam and papam, this kind of like through action burning out of from the past actions.
Okay. All right. So I think the question is, so you get born. See, look at your life right now. Everyone's going through ups and downs. The ups and downs that you're going through are different from the ups and downs that I'm going through, that everyone here is going through. This is a standard experience for everyone here. No one's an exception to that. We all have ups and downs in life, but your ups and downs are different from my ups and downs. Now, if I just sort of rest and I just do nothing and I just go through my life and just bring these ups and allow them to come, and then I say, no, it's my karma. It's a common thing. It's my karma. Okay. Now, this becomes a very deceiving statement. It's almost a permission slip not to do anything. But what, according to the Gita, your whole life, as I started this conversation, is any kind of helplessness or hopelessness or lack of progress or stuckness or things are not moving at the speed that I want them to, or I'm not thinking well, I'm not thinking straight. Any form of that is a papam that you have. Now, how do you come out of that papam? You can either just not do anything and then complain, it's my karma for not being a good thinker, for not being a healthy person, for being always sick. It's my karma. Yeah, it is your karma. But at the same time, you're given the capacity to kartum shakyam, akartum shakyam, anyata kartum shakyam. And those three abilities, they negate the effects of that push that is making your life not conducive for harmony. Because if you spend your whole life, this is happening to me, then all life just becomes about coping techniques to feel good, to negate the effects of life just, throwing you new things to bear. So what you have to do, this is the duty of every individual, is consistently take actions for the sake of helping yourself, for helping your mind, purifying your mind, looking at things in a different, deeper, more different perspective. And through that repetition, you eventually develop a wonderful, thoughtful, discerning, and dispassionate mind. And that took effort. And that effort, which you have on a consistent basis taken to help yourself to reach something that's higher at the transactional level, that effort has now brought your mind to a state where when you listen to self-knowledge, when I say your nature is consciousness, which is not moved throughout this entire conversation of this 1 hour, which is just being present, still, and available. And throughout the availability of consciousness, there was a conversation going on, there was a face that was happening, and there was a listener that was there with a body and a mind and a culture and a perspective that was just there listening to this person. And the entire event that has been going on has consciousness. And so that consciousness, your nature, you now start to relate to. You say, when I say to you, you are the unmoving presence, your awareness, just ordinary, down to earth, common, everyday awareness, which is there all the time. You don't have to do anything about it. You don't have to summon it. You don't have to, find it. It's there. In the presence of it, there is a person who is finding awareness. In the presence of it, there is a mind that is questioning whether there is awareness. In the presence of it, there is a brain that is throwing out different images and different thoughts. In the presence of it, there is a conversation about it going on. It is there. It is who you are. It is the most available and intrinsic, deepest and most intimate truth of who you are. It's the most intimate, and that is your real truth. Now, suppose you're saying, I'm relating to this. I really connect to your words, Andre. And I say to you, well, why is that? And you say to me, I can't explain that, but I'm just connecting to your words. And I say to you, that is because of all of your work prior. You have worked and worked to negate the effects of those papams that you have gotten, that you have taken from the previous life. And you have worked sincerely to the point where your minds become so sharp and so attuned that you're able to naturally relate to deeper things of life, of your nature, of God, of devotion. You're able to see and appreciate the truth that is here and now in this moment. It's not a statement, a philosophical statement that I speak of. It is a truth that's here and now. Therefore, in summary, one sentence summary of your question, doing work to negate the effects of past causes. So I want to be clear here. What is the job? How do you come to this reality, which will be verse 18, discussed in detail? How do you come to appreciate and let go of this need to figure out who I am? How do you finally relinquish, because this is the final biggest step required, to let go of the need to know who I am? See, in reality, if everything was going on without any issues, you would not have to seek this, because how can you seek what you already are? It's like seeking for my hand, where's my hand? It's right here. No, I don't believe it. This is not, it has to be somebody else's hand. No, it's right here. So it becomes so obvious. But how do you do this? And you have to understand the job of action and knowledge. You see, what is the job of action? Like spiritual action, like meditation or chanting. What is the job of an action? We discussed this earlier.
Clarify the mind.
Purify the mind. I said something else about action that is more general. What is the purpose of action? What does action do? And then
Get a result.
Get a result. This is what David said first time. Okay. And then I followed that up with saying that what kind of result? The result that you have right now, or the result that you don't have right now? That you
To be fulfilled.
To be fulfilled. That means I am not fulfilled right now. That means I'm doing an action in order to bring fulfillment that I'm not enjoying right now. So let's make this very clear. What is the purpose of any form of action? It is to bring forth or manifest or make into a reality, whatever words you want to use, to bring forth something that is not true right now. Is this making sense? This is the nature of any form of action. Now, what is then the nature of any form of knowledge? If action is to bring forth something that is not true now, then what is the job of knowledge? What do you think?
To understand what fulfillment is.
To
Understand what fulfillment is.
Okay. And okay.
Rid
Good.
of ignorance.
To remove your ignorance, okay. Anything else? What's the job of knowledge, Vijay?
Yeah, as something that you don't know today, maybe you get to know about it when you listen to this.
Okay, good. So let's go with this. So you don't know today. So this means I'm engaging in knowledge of something that I don't know today so that I may come to know it tomorrow, right? For instance. So what is then the job of knowledge?
To identify yourself and self-worth.
Discover what is.
I love that. Okay. Pankaj?
It is not only to know yourself, but to have firm faith that what you know is correct. I may know as an answer to a question that I am God, but to what extent do I believe? What is my firm faith in this? That final Nidhi Dhyasnam is the real knowledge.
That's the removing that final, I'm still not sold. I get what you're saying, but I'm still not sold. Something's still holding me doubtful. Good. And Ashish?
Yeah, so I think the job of the knowledge is to reveal an object true to itself, like how it exactly is.
Okay, this is very similar to Andre and Naina.
Actually, I was about to say the same thing, to reveal the unknown.
Reveal the unknown. Yep. Similar category. Yep. And Michael?
Well, in the context of action, I think it's to inform our actions. So not the job of knowledge is to ensure that what actions we take are more aligned with what our values are.
That means
trying to achieve.
Good. So that means that there is already an existent right way to do something, and I'm applying an action so that my current actions may align with something that's already there. Okay. So good. So what the job of an act of knowledge is to uncover, which we all have said in some ways or the other, uncover what's already true. That's it. Now, what does Vedanta say about you? You are that which is actionless. That is already a true fact right now. You have to start with a statement. Now, whether you believe this or not right now, it doesn't matter. But you have to start somewhere. This is how a teaching happens. So Vedanta explicitly says, you are that which is actionless, which has never applied an action in your life. That means you have no punyam nor papam at all. Your body has, but not you. Consciousness has no punyam or papam. So your nature is actionless. And the way to discover that which is unknown to you, and yet you are right now, is through, it cannot be through knowledge, through action, because action is there to give you something that you don't have right now. But actually, you are right now already that. You are that very actionless presence, awareness in this moment. So the only solution thus becomes is not to gain it, but to uncover it. And for uncovering something, I need knowledge. And what kind of knowledge and how do we uncover this? This will be in detail stated next week. And we will ask you one question before ending. Okay. When facing a difficult situation, how does one typically decide between doing, not doing, and doing something different?
It should be in alignment with Dharma.
What is it that makes one do, not do, and do something different? On the basis of what do they do that?
Is it on the basis of seeking our own comfort and well-being?
Yeah. Good. I heard comfort. Okay, that's a good start. Let's go with that. What else?
Yeah. You tend to do what you are normally used to doing, right? So somewhat similar to what the previous was, you have to break that comfort zone. Only then maybe the real growth happens. But yeah, we tend to stick to what we are comfortable doing. If it doesn't work, then yeah, maybe lament and cry and say, oh, why me? But we very rarely try to do something different to really break our barriers and expand our
yeah, exactly.
potential.
Otherwise, you're like all those animals who were, all eaten by the lion until you're the rabbit who says, let me do something different, which is not comfortable, is it? To do something different. Until then, no real change happens. And this is the case for everyone. Make that choice right now. Do you want growth or do you want comfort? If you want comfort, okay, I won't see you next week. If you want growth, don't expect comfort. Are you okay with that? Are you okay with that statement? If you want growth, don't expect comfort always.
It all comes down to ultimately become your own self-critic, in the sense you have to have discrimination to gain the correct knowledge and work on that. So in other words, you find your own faults first yourself to reach that awareness. Does that make sense?
It does.
I wanted to add to what everyone else said, that when it comes to being faced with a difficult situation and deciding the way to act, based on what we've said, is recognizing, what story of yours or narrative of yours is at play, and then seeing if that is influencing how you want to act, and trying to be objective as possible by choosing perhaps other ways to look at the situation, and then deciding which feels more aligned with the highest good.
Brilliant. Yeah. So being looking at those stories again, taking that effort to maybe some reframing requires, some perceptual change required. It is effort, and so this is what is required. So let this be remembered very well. If you want growth, don't expect comfort, but it's totally worthwhile. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.